When you hear the rhythm, start to move.
Hi everyone, my name is Varya and this is Shameless Careers, a podcast about career change. Today, I'm super thrilled to interview Edu, and you will know why shortly. Edu has done tons of really cool things in his career and he's made a lot of career pivots. Edu started his career at a trading desk at Goldman Sachs. Then he dared to move from Goldman Sachs to do an MBA at LBS. Then he moved to BCG to do strategy consulting, and now he's a general manager at a successful tech firm, Medallia. Edu, thank you so much for being here, and I can't wait to ask you everything about what has prompted you to make all these moves, how you thought about it, and what have you learned and what advice you would give to others who are considering career changes for themselves. All right, so let's start broad. Do you mind walking me through your career path at a high level, and then we'll zoom into each of the parts of your journey separately?
Absolutely. Varya, thank you for having me. You mentioned all of that career path, and I'm thinking, wow, that sounds like a lifetime. So a lot has happened, yeah. So if I were to walk back and give you a helicopter view, I started my career a bit unexpectedly in finance. I initially wanted to pursue a career as a lawyer to later on become the president of Ecuador. And in my junior year in university, I did an internship in a brokerage firm in Boston. And this short experience basically opened my eyes to the power of capital. And that led me to finance and to Goldman. I did not join Goldman from a typical career, a poaching university. I went to Bates College, a wonderful university, but quite small, and went through 64 interviews to get to my first role. And initially, I joined the European equities team, and in that role, had a fantastic experience. But I was getting up at 4:25 in the morning to turn on the lights of the trading desk every single day, and in that process lost all my hair. From there, I basically had a wonderful experience. Goldman was a bit like a real-time training ground and university of how to deal with large projects and pressure. And then I moved to the commodity derivatives team. And in that role, I basically advised governments and companies on commodity volatility. That role was incredible because it was in years where commodity prices were soaring. And it kind of let me go back into Latin America, where I aspired to have work experience in. And when the financial crisis hit, that opened an opportunity for me to open up again and kind of think again, where do I want to take my career? Europe was a place where I wanted to live. And so I leveraged an MBA as a moment to step backward, think what I wanted to do, and, meet great new people and all of that, but relocate to London. So from there, I joined Boston Consulting Group. Also, that experience came from my summer internship. I never thought that from banking I would go to consulting ever. But then I went to have a summer internship there and learn about the power of problem solving, structured thinking, and just in general advisory. In that journey, I had wonderful mentors and friends who were, starting to work in tech. And I realized just how big the digital transformation was going to be. I wanted to be part of it. And on the other end, I was craving more ownership over the operational outcomes of a company, not just advisory, not just problem solving, but actually hands-on leadership, hands-on work. So I joined Medallia. It's a SaaS company that is dedicated at changing customer experience. I was employee 24 in EMEA. We were starting to scale here across Europe. And basically, since have been 9 years, which I cannot believe. And I was in the team that basically scaled up the business in Europe while we were going towards an IPO. We did an IPO in 2018. Then after that was with the team that started expanding Europe quite rapidly until 2021. And then team that was working under a private equity firm that invested in the company since 2021. So held about 6 roles so far at Medallia, but always with the focus of building teams, shaping talent, and basically setting up the business for success. So yeah, that's my career path. It's a lot.
So how did you decide to leave financial services industry, and what prompted you to do an MBA and actually take the step back to consider what would you like to do next?
Yeah, look, I think you know and have said it right. I can go back to the moment where I resigned from Goldman and communicated that I wanted to explore a different career path. And I remember one of the leaders of my business was very kind and said, do you realize what you're doing?
So kind.
Yeah, well, I mean, he said, you've worked very hard, right? You have crossed one of the biggest thresholds, which is to get promoted in the first stages of a Goldman Sachs career. That promotion is extremely rigorous. It's very demanding. And so career progression is very tough, always, but at the start especially. So I had reached that summit, and it was unclear why was I walking away from what could have been bigger responsibility. So the way that I have felt about my career changes, and specifically at that moment, was that for me, at the heart of my success and at the heart of my happiness is purpose. So I definitely need to get up in the morning not every Monday, but the majority of Mondays, wanting to get out of bed with a mission to go and do and build something, And at that point in time, I had reached that summit that I had set out for myself. I had obtained a promotion that was critical for me. And when I went back into my purpose, I felt that there was a lot more for me to go and look at. And it was perhaps not there at that time. Why? I had started to feel that I was becoming very niched, very niche in my skill set and in my knowledge. I felt that I was actually looking at the world from 1,000 miles away. In a trading desk, you manage notional trades or notional discussions that impact entire economies, which is wonderful, but you're very far away from the reality of managing a business or a team. And these are challenges I wanted to explore. I did not want to go down the route of just shaping a career for the sake of shaping a career. I wanted to go back to my purpose, my sense of self, and to really go and do that, And so that was one part of it. The other part of it was that there was a global financial crisis. And I noticed that a lot of the discussions we were having with clients were transformed by the lack of trust that they started having in the financial services system because of the bailouts and the amount of people that had lost, savings or homes out of the crisis. And I noticed that I was looking at 24 months of potentially very negative conversations. I had already gone through a first phase of the crisis. So I endured my muscle of having that tough muscle of performing during a crisis. But I realized what's the opportunity cost for me to go and think different way, right? So I took that opportunity to go and study. And I really like to study. And I realized that I didn't have the mental bandwidth or the time to make the career decision. And I wanted to be in a classroom. I wanted to refresh my mindset. I wanted to be with great people. And I thought of an MFA, a master's in finance, or a master's in business. And the MBA ended up being the route I took. And I wouldn't regret it for a second. So those would be the 2 reasons why I made that.
Interesting. Yeah. Would you say that based on how you describe your purpose, that it's doing something closer to real world and something tangible, like building something, and that's kind of what has prompted you to leave financial services towards something that's closer to business, essentially shaping something and doing something in the real world?
Yeah. Look, I think we all are shaped by a sense of purpose that is so personal, right? They call it intrinsic motivation. They call it sense of self or purpose, right? And that purpose is something we go it changes, it evolves, and it really differs according to the stage of life you're in. When I went to Goldman initially, my purpose was to get trained, to be among people that were smart, and to be around leaders who likely would instill in me work ethic and analytical skills and the ability to solve complex problems for companies and etc. Right? So that was my purpose then, which was learning. In my second phase, my sense of purpose had changed, and it went towards this idea of embedding technology or business acumen into companies and advising those companies. That's how I ended up maybe shifting in that second phase. I realized that having a problem-solving muscle, like the ability of structured thinking, of breaking a problem down, of thinking about different industries and quickly learning how to think about value drivers and what makes a business grow was going to be a muscle I needed for a very long time. That's how I then went to BCG. And again, it was a very big sense of purpose around learning, about acquiring skills, about continuing to develop. And this is something I would always recommend to young mentees of mine or folks that are thinking about how to think of their careers. I always say, look, never think that a career is linear. Think that careers are fluid, right? And think that you're going to be able to come in and out of a career, in and out of a role, explore different industries if you have the mindset and the energy, right? But do not ever, as much as the world and your background allows you to, never allow yourself to be forever in a role or in a career that doesn't make you tick. Just continue fighting that battle against conformity. Know when you have a deadline on a specific role and look for that sense of purpose. And the purpose runs out. It's rare that you see somebody that says, I've been 40 years here and I still love it. We have to keep the purpose fresh, and so I would say that that's something big. Yeah. Yeah.
And do you think if financial crisis didn't happen and everything was still booming, it would be more difficult to leave Goldman?
It could have been, but I think the undercurrent to this bigger picture in my day-to-day, I had lived in the US for about 10 years at that time or so, and about 7 years in New York. And I knew and I was certain that I wanted to live in Europe. So there was that element, The other element was I felt that at that time, we had a very rigid value set in Goldman and in finance. And I was looking for a place where authenticity and being yourself at work was more celebrated. And so there were elements of the culture that I loved and really thrived in, right? The rigor, the client focus, the value about thinking about changing the world type of things. Very important values at that time. But I still craved a place where I could be, unequivocally myself at work, And so there was something that I couldn't find in that role and at that time in that company. And I knew that I needed to go somewhere where I could show up as I am, within a professional environment, right? But I wanted to find that. So then that there was also that search. There was also that search of what company, what industry allows for that, more diversity, more inclusive workplace, that type of thing. I was looking for that. So I think if the financial crisis hadn't happened, maybe I would have been there a little longer. Maybe yes. Now, the last item I would say is, again, when I am giving advice and folks ask me, when should I change a career? Because it can be a timing thing, right? I love thinking of the question of should I change a career right after you've been promoted to a big role or to a promotion you were looking for. It's a very good moment to think about that question. Why? Because you likely reached a summit that you had been working for towards a long period of time. So being goal-oriented and reaching that summit is important, right? Now, the next question is this new role, is this new journey something that is going to really reward me in the sense of purpose or with my skills building? And at that time, I felt that I wanted to shift up my skills curve. So I had built a sense of a set of skills, a set of performance capabilities and a mindset, right? But I thought that if I stayed, even in wider responsibility, I wasn't going to shift upward my skills. And so when I saw an MBA and then later consulting, I realized these roles are going to take my skills, they're going to really challenge me, and I'm going to develop a bigger skill set in the next journey of however long that takes. And that's what I experienced at BCG, that it was like 24 months of a very fast-paced skills building that was entirely net new to what I did in finance. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it sounds like kind of three things coincided. You looking for sense of purpose, for a better cultural fit where you feel yourself at work, and finally just practical skill set element where you felt like, okay, you have learned what you could learn here, so what's this next phase that can accelerate your skill set expansion going forward? And so you said that this is when you decided to do an MBA and you wanted to move to Europe. So as you joined MBA, you kind of didn't know yet that consulting will be your next step. Or did you suspect that already?
Yeah, did not know at all. Okay. Imagine, I mean, in the MBA, oftentimes my peers were saying, why did you leave Goldman? So again, that question that you were saying earlier, it at times felt that I was a salmon, swimming against the current, right? Because a lot of folks that had gone to the MBA were looking at that time to join a company like Goldman, right? Or to make a career change to a trading desk in London or in New York, right? Where I had walked away from. And so, yeah, I think there was an element of rethinking where did I want to go. When I left and I went to the MBA, I definitely went in with an open mind. I realized that financial services were not going to go anywhere. So in the event that I had done a move that I would regret, I would have a wonderful career, really educational experience, right? I would have met amazing people, traveled the world, and refresh myself, and hopefully would have come back stronger and fresher back to my finance career. So I did think that I would at the time look for roles in private equity or in another role in a bank. And I believe in the power of piloting things and doing something small that may challenge you. And that was that summer internship at BCG. It was a compressed 2-month experience of trying something entirely new. I ended up joining due to having great mentors at London Business School who had worked at BCG, people that were extremely kind and were saying to me that they saw me enjoying working consulting, or peers that were in my case study teams and that said, you should explore this, friends and mentors, alumni that kept saying, give it a chance. And I did, and I think it was, I'm very grateful that segue happened because I think that led me to more things that I would not otherwise have found. Yeah.
And what options did you consider as you were doing MBA? So why did consulting experience, this internship that you were just referring to, impress you so much that you felt, okay, that's the right?
I love this question. I go back a little bit to this initial lens that I had earlier, which was, where am I? So the first thing I said in my interviews, I was very transparent saying, I really want to work in teams that are authentic. I don't want to come to a cookie cutter, top-down cultural firm where if folks are expected to behave a certain kind of way, I want to see authenticity. And at that time, BCG had a very important value, which was you chart your own path. And that really resonated with me because I felt I'm going to be able to really go in and craft my career through casework, through industry work, that was important. And so I wanted to do that, right? To be authentic in my work. And that was not something I was used to. Now it sounds very normal because now all companies and career offices are talking about authenticity, diversity, but at that time it wasn't the case. It was very unheard of in a way. The second bucket of decision for this was the skills part, So I really wanted to shift my skills curve upward. And when I realized the options that I had, I saw that this would be the biggest challenge for me to take on because it's a very different way of working that I was used to. In banking, folks are used to working in a more perfectionist manner where you develop the work and you show the work at 95%. In consulting, at least my experience was that you work in an iterative manner where people problem solve as a team from 40%. So you enter an entirely different way of working, right? And so that was very appealing because it was almost like at the root of my cognitive skills that something was going to change. And it was not comfortable, for sure. I think I was 30 years old at the time. So you are made already in a certain way. And it was a challenge. So I think that was the other part of it. The last part of it was I wasn't ready to go to an industry player. I still wanted to be across industries. I really wanted to learn about different strategic problems. I wanted to understand what was happening in the digital space. And because I didn't have technical skills to go to software or technology, I felt that would be a great bridge to get there. And it was, it helped me later on go to software. Yeah.
And have you considered doing something entrepreneurial when you were at MBA? Because I would imagine when you are doing an MBA, you're surrounded by people, a lot of whom want to venture into their own business, do their own stuff. Has this idea crossed your mind? And how do you think about it?
Yeah, I love that you just asked that because I hadn't thought of this for a bit. During the MBA, somehow, I got involved in 3 projects. So one was a venture fund of creative ventures. So it was a team of people, designers, architects, etc. And then myself and a very close friend were the kind of the business or investor side of it, arrangement of it, right, of the project and the fund. And we funded about 17 different projects in Ecuador. It was like kind of a social experiment, social investing experiment. So that I did then. With my siblings, we launched a boutique hostel concept.
I love it.
The idea of this was a flash packing. It was targeted for flash packers. I had seen that in one of my MBA trips.
Sorry, what's flash packing? Maybe it's my post-student.
No, it's like a hospitality jargon thing. A backpacker is somebody that, we know the backpackers, right? They are looking to travel on the cheap. The flashbacker is a backpacker that wants the comfort.
Oh.
So they want to have the backpacking experience of community. They want to travel solo, but they want to have a communal table. But they don't want to sleep in rooms that have 17 other people. They want to have their own comfy shower, comfy bed, duvets, and showers.
So they want the best of all worlds.
Of all worlds, yeah.
I'm a target audience, I think.
You are a target audience. Yeah.
A shower, a communal table. Yeah.
Yeah,
Why should they be mutually exclusive?
All the adventures that age are perfect for flashbackers, So we traveled with friends during the MBA. I saw this concept or similar-ish in Vienna and pitched it to my siblings, and my sister ended up taking it on. And so we built this concept Boutiquito. It was great as an experience for us as a family and as a family business. We learned that hospitality is very tough. There were several things that happened in Ecuador. We did okay, but we didn't end up taking it forward. But the experience of building that hotel and breaking even and shaping a brand and working with my family business was outstanding. So yeah, I think to your initial question, I love entrepreneurship. And that's maybe why I have stayed so long at Medallia. Because in spite of it being a global software company, my roles have been, for the most part, about scaling up businesses that didn't exist before. So yeah, entrepreneurship is fantastic. Yeah.
Would you consider it at some point for yourself?
Yeah.
Like to go and do something on your own? Could this be an option, or is it something that you're like, okay, I can be an entrepreneur, but within a corporate organization, and that works for me?
No, I think I definitely will consider it. And to me, it goes back to that initial question about the evolution of your sense of purpose. I see it in my family when I look at my grandparents, when I look at my father. They worked in companies and in corporations at some point in their life, but they always ended up going to build their own businesses. And I really admire that and really appreciate that. So yeah, I would love to do that. I think I'm not there yet. You want to have one, a great idea.
Yeah, I guess.
And two, a great team.
That would be a good start. Yeah. And have any of your friends, by the way, from MBA gone down the entrepreneurship route, and how did it end up?
Yeah, look, I think it's very interesting because maybe I have the wrong statistics, okay? But if I were to look at when we started, a very large bucket of people wanted to go into banking, and a very large bucket of people wanted to go into consulting. Tech jobs and large tech were starting to employ from that type of talent pool. So you didn't hear at the start of the experience that people were thinking of that. People that went into tech were a minority. And then there was a very small fraction of people that went in with the lens of, I want to be an entrepreneur, right? So that minority that wanted to be entrepreneurs, they followed through. So, we had a classmate that went on to build a guides business and later on turned it into a software company that she later exited. Just extremely impressive. We had another classmate that kind of built a bit of a CPG business and his own brewery. And now he's created a brand around it and continues to operate that business out of London. We had other examples. So yeah, I think there was that entrepreneur class. What I ended up finding, though, is that people that went into those banking or consulting jobs, later on, after 2 years, 2.5 years, I actually started looking for early stage businesses, so like VC funded companies or entrepreneurship in new companies, or moving to roles in companies that were starting to shape new businesses from scratch, and then I don't know how many of them there were, but people like me that went to companies in early stages that hadn't opened in some regions, like in the case of Medallia, we hadn't operated in Europe, and we had to scale the business up from the ground up, which is very entrepreneurial, So I think a lot of folks left the traditional roles that they had come into, if not by the end of the MBA experience, 2 or 3 years after. It's evolved quite a lot.
So yeah, it's so interesting that you're bringing up entrepreneurship. And every time I speak to someone about the purpose in their careers, this idea of entrepreneurship comes up over and over again, meaning that I feel like a lot of people find this purpose like in some entrepreneurial activities. You know what I mean? When you have a vision, when you shape something, and then one way or the other, whether you start your own business, whether you're doing entrepreneurship in a company that's scaling, or like running your division in an entrepreneurial fashion in a big firm, it feels like, yeah, this type of entrepreneurial spirit in one shape or another is partly kind of the answer to the question, like, what is my purpose in the career? And that's the answer for many people that I keep hearing.
Yeah. And maybe want to say one thing. This is why this type of conversation and what you're doing is so valuable, because I find that when you're thinking about career pathing and thinking about your future as an individual, sometimes you are formed by the legacy of the advice that you received. So if your parents came from a background where they were rigidly brought up, or they had to work extremely hard, right, to get you to have an education, or you come from a very different creative background, right, and the advice you sometimes get is that there's just one way of thinking of a career, and it's normally a formulaic, very rigid way of thinking of it. Now, you can take a long-term view, a mid-term view to how to get to the destination you want to go. And so to your point, some individuals may want to be an entrepreneur, and some may be as great as Mark Zuckerberg and on day one, nail it, right? They got the idea, they executed the idea, and they scaled it up all the way to a successful IPO and to listing the company and having a large tech business that influences the world. Bravo, right? A lot of people may be ready for that destination, but there's a lot of other people that may be on their route to solve a very big business problem or world problem, but may need to have a salary come in at the end of the month, right? They may not have the privilege of going out there and go into a lab and think about an idea or the courage to go and work in their garage, right? And so there's steps and ladders people can take. And I think that's a valuable thinking that needs to get done by all of us when we're thinking about career planning, right? If I cannot go right away to this role because I lack the technical skills, or if I cannot go and do this role because I don't have the startup funding, then what's my ladder to get there? And that ladder is when you start thinking about what you just said, which is startup, a role in a large company in a startup area, right? A role in a startup region. Being part of a team that is funding a new company in a large enterprise that is funded, etc. So I think it's important to think of that when you're thinking about your career, not just a rigid path.
Yeah, so being directionally knowing where you want to move to, and then kind of seeking the experience that bring you closer and closer to this type of work.
Yeah.
I think also to your point around the fact that we grow up with some formula in our head around what a successful career looks like, I think what I personally partly blame is a societal narrative around what's prestigious. For example, like a job like at Goldman Sachs or like big brands, there is so much, I know, it almost feels like we're often assessed by what type of brand we work for. And almost we're going too far and we start identifying whether we're successful or not by these definitions, whether the company we work is cool, whether if you're standing in the bar with someone, you can say, oh, I work here and there. Like a lot of graduates, and fair enough, these are cool, very competitive jobs. And when you are at the university, everyone is crazy about applying and being accepted there. But I think, it's not the answer to the question, what's my life's purpose? And in fact, like even looking at your experience, once you are there, the question at some point will come up, like, are you living your purpose? Are you in the right place? And I just wish we knew kind of that all of this prestige is just a formality from earlier on. Because I feel like this transition from you like believing in this prestige and success towards you realizing that, oh, maybe that's not the answer. I don't know, it could have been a smoother transition, and maybe we would have allowed ourselves to look for paths that work for ourselves earlier on without being blindsided by all these prestige brands and stuff like that.
Yeah. And look, I mean, the prestige is earned. Like, we cannot fool ourselves. There are a lot of companies that you mentioned, right? That these great employers that will invest in a 60 or 90-day training and onboarding when you're fresh off school. That will invest every Friday and in an annual basis over $2,800 worth of direct coaching on emotional skills on your development. I mean, we can find factual things that make these brands what they are, right? And why it's valuable to aspire and work to go there. For sure. I mean, that we shouldn't debate, but it cannot be the end of the story, right? When you think about the things that make you successful, there are a lot of people that can go and work in an incredible brand, incredible company with an amazing product, but with a bad manager or bad leader, right? And then their experience is tarnished and they could develop insecurities, fear, non-developmental roles are terrible, right? On the other end, there may be a less sexy company or less known brand with a fantastic and structured career path and enablement, where the product may be less sexy, but there's an incredible leader and there's an incredible manager that will shape you to be successful and that will believe in you and champion your career and ideally give you feedback along the way so that you never stop developing, but gives you that platform and you develop in a healthy manner. And so if you pick the two experiences, and especially as you go to later in life where you want to grow, the role of your leader, of the quality of the values of that leader, I find that start mattering more and more and more, because you are imparting values to your teams. The higher you go, right, the more you matter to the success of others, how you lead, how you think. And so in that sense, as you go in this career planning process, it's really important that folks are thinking, who is this leader, right? Like, what are the values of this leader? Has this person had a track record of promotion? Has this person a mindset of coaching versus managing? And am I aligned to the values of that person? I think that is a very important lens to that question of, okay, if I put the logo or the company name to the side, what really matters? The product quality, the service quality, all of that. But the leader, who is that person? What are the values really matters? Yeah.
And to go back to the MBA experience, would you say, what would you recommend MBA to other people? And I guess the reason why I'm asking is that there are something that I've heard before is that a lot of people go into MBA because they want to drastically change their career. But what I've also heard, and maybe that's just about executive MBA, that a lot of people then end up in the previous paths, which made me think maybe MBA is a good solution for someone, but not to someone else. So based on what you have observed, would you recommend MBA as a way to transition your career?
Yeah. Look, I think this is an age-old debate that a lot of people will have passionate opinions about, because you find that a lot of people question the overall ROI, right? Like the overall, what did you really get out of it? For me, it was a wonderful stepping stone, and it was a wonderful experience, immersive. On the MBA, I would say first, really time it well.
Yeah.
Really think about when to make the decision so that you are extracting what you need. The second element is it is a wonderful tool when you're thinking about a transition or career change, right? Career change in terms of industry or career change in terms of changing a geography. So if you're in Europe and you aspire to live in the US, if you're in the US and aspire to live in Spain, MBAs are a fantastic tool to go immerse, meet a lot of people, generate a network, and restart your career in the same role or different role. And look, the last item is, I think a lot of folks get to a place in their careers where they're very burnt out, and they may love their career, but they want to have a different experience. And that's great, because an MBA allows you to generate a very deep set of bonds with a new network and friends that are likely going to become your new lifelong friends. So I stand by it. I have a side to my MBA experience that I really cared about the academics. I think not everybody does. For me, I think I really wanted to learn things that I hadn't done. So strategy work, case work, even deeper in corporate finance, things that were technical that I learned in in the role. So I think for people that are academically minded, there's such richness in the classes you can take. So highly recommend going. I would totally do that again and again. And to your point about the executive MBA, that makes sense. An immersive MBA is very different to an executive MBA. An immersive MBA is you really are full-time there. You're not working and studying. So I would think about that question too.
Yeah. And just to kind of fast forward to You did an MBA. You loved consulting, was something that we talked about, why you loved it and why it has impressed you so much. How did you make decision around what to do after consulting? So you considered, what paths did you consider? Um, and kind of now that I know that you went into tech space, have you considered, how have you chosen which type of tech company to go to? Early stage, late stage? What type of tech? Like, how did you think about your journey post consulting?
I knew that I wanted to be in a place where I would have impact on the strategy of the company. So I had put that as a must-have when I was in consulting. And I wanted to be part of something that was having impact in the world. And so thanks to a really close friend, I was introduced to the leadership team that was scaling up this company that was trying to make the experience of customers better. And they were in a Series C stage. So pre-IPO, 200 employees globally, only like 18 in Europe. And so what led me there was a clear sense of, I want to be part of this leadership team. I want to take this software that solves the pain of customer experiences, making companies treat their customers better. And I want to be in the journey of building this up in Europe. So that's what led me there. And I highly recommend that people think about your point about maturity a lot, right? Like maturity of the company. Starting working in a Series A to Series C means that you are working in a company that has yet a lot to build. It has processes to develop, systems to create, where you're going to have several hats, and where you're going to be exposed to uncomfortable moments because the company will be growing for a long period of time, hopefully. Right? So you're exposed to changing organizational models, changing roles, pivots in strategy, requirements to sometimes pick up and start a new region. You have to really lift up your sleeves. I would say that after Series E and forward, you're exposed to fast changing, fast growth in tech, but you're in more stable companies. So if you go to work in companies that are large tech, you are going to likely be working in a place that is more similar to like a Goldman Sachs, right? Very defined roles, very large teams, very large departments, So I highly recommend that people think what's right for them. What's their risk-taking appetite? What's their level of comfort with uncertainty? And for me, that I'm growth-minded and that I like to build and shape talent, the journey of setting up Medallia in EMEA was amazing because I got to open the business across South EMEA, set up the entities in France, in Spain, in Italy. Later on, run that region across with the UK. We acquired several companies, so we brought them on board. And so to that end, never had the same role. And that's something I value, but it's not for everybody. But I would recommend people that want to have, diversity to go into a tech scale up if they like to change and they like to build. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes total sense. And just to wrap up this conversation that went into both kind of existential, philosophical, and practical dimensions too. If you kind of took it all together, what would be the advice that you would give to people who are thinking about a career change?
I'll be very tactical about this, but it's perhaps the biggest tool I've built for myself. Grab an A4 paper, white paper, put it horizontally, write on the right-hand side the goals that you have set for yourself 3 to 5 years out. Write them out. Ideally less than 5 or 5, but things that really matter to you. And on the left-hand side, put yourself in a timeline and start making ideation around the possible roles you're exploring. And little by little, start to meet people, get mentors, open coffee chats, and through conversation and not online applications, start charting your path to your destination. Usually you find that if you start thinking about the roles and the 5 goals you have, it will start cleaning itself out. And I go to this tactical advice because when you don't do it, it doesn't happen.
You just float around. Yeah.
You need to write it out for it to happen. And it's a very convoluted paper. It's a very interesting, and it takes time and effort to think about goals. It really takes time. So just do it. Just do it and be courageous. I think life is short. And the last thing you want to happen is that if one day a tsunami is coming your way, you're sitting in a computer thinking, oh my God, I just wasted 4 years of my life doing this stuff. Life is never perfect. We can never always pick the job that we want, but you don't want to be caught out, frustrated for a very long period of time, just out of the fear or the inertia of changing. So start with that paper is what I would say.
Thank you, Edu.
Yeah.
I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Varya.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Subscribe, like, share, do all of these amazing things. And until next time, be shameless.
But according to our investigators' report, we find that